Is it ever OK to have that sort of segregation? Because, of course, the implication of that is we are teaching the children that if you have something, then you allow and you can pay for it, you should have more of it.
Well, that's capitalism, which is the society we live in. I mean, unless we're going to allow the whole of Mayfair to be taken over by whoever wants to come in. I think the story here is more complicated than that. When it's presented like that, it sounds awful. And I think in our social media world, we're all like that story and go, oh, isn't that outrageous? But then when you stop and think for a moment, there are fenced-off gardens across the whole of London. The garden, London Square is a classic thing. They're all fenced off and locked. The people who pay the service charge use them. In this development, I looked at the plans, and it was quite interesting, actually. There are two different developments. There is a posh bit where people are paid lots, and there is a social housing bit. And this is basically the garden of the posh bit. I don't really understand why a playground is that important. There's a playground, I looked at the map, just across the road anyway, so why don't you just use the playground and just have a great big garden there? But I think the non-story here is that London is massively short of housing. And in this development, the council did really well. They actually got 60 social housing units out of 140. Now, bearing in mind most councils get bamboozled by developers, lawyers, and they start out with the development saying there'll be 100 social units, and then somewhere along the line, the economic conditions change and that gets downgraded to 10. Anything where a council manages to get 60 social housing units is fine by me. I think if that's the price to pay for 60 families who can't afford to live in our crazy property market in London, then that's the price I'm happy to pay.
You see, some people might say those who have social housing, you know, are being given a home in a nice area, which is something that they obviously deserve. But those who are paying extra for extra facilities were like, hang on, you've got a home in a nice area, we're paying for this, why should you also get that?
I think this kind of segregation is self-evidently wrong, as you can be seen from the huge reaction there's been to the films, the videos of these children being separated from the communal garden in the development that was built by a fence that wasn't in the original plans. This is something that the developer has put in later, specifically to segregate these children, and this is absolutely, completely wrong. I think we need to be able to plan our city as we envision it for the future, and that is as an inclusive city. Putting in these exclusive bits of the development only for certain residents is completely wrong, and arguing that it's on cost grounds is ridiculous. This is a playground. They had to build open space. The access to it doesn't cost any more or less.
I mean, I think that the point here is simple. If the profit motive of being able to use the word exclusive. Now, personally, if I'm buying a flat, I wouldn't give a monkey's, but if some people care about that, so be it. I would tend to...
People don't care about it. They're being marketed to.
So then the market
people don't really want that.
If that's what people don't want, then good developers won't do this again. This is a bad developer who shouldn't have done it. But let the market do it.
Good mayors, good planning authorities would ban it. That's the point.
Politicians tend to muck stuff up horribly, as we've seen clearly from Brexit. So why don't we leave it to the market, which tends to be better? If people don't want that, I don't want it, you don't want it, developers won't give it.
Is there a responsibility of developers, though? We talk a lot on this programme about broken communities and things going wrong generally in the wider society because of that. If developers are building something which makes a group of people feel excluded from simply playing with the other children they go to school with, shouldn't that responsibility be taken into account when you're building, effectively, a small community?
I don't think you can ask developers to suddenly have massive social consciences. We as society should do exactly what the private residents did, which say, I don't like it, take the hedge out. That was the right reaction. I think this is Britain working quite well myself. A developer's gone in with something that I agree, I think is a bit distasteful, weird and unpleasant, and the posher or whatever people, the wealthier people have gone, that's disgusting, we don't want it, and they'll get it taken out.
But it shouldn't even be designed in the first place.
OK, Sean, but what about the fact that it's very hard for social housing to be built in high-pressure places where housing is a premium? It's very hard for councils to get that through because of the cost and the reward of it. And if this is going to put developers off, then maybe we'll get less social housing, and actually the whole area will be exclusive.
I don't think it's going to put developers off. What we've had in previous years is a big scandal about poor doors. So that's the... And this is... I mean, you talk about capitalism. Capitalism and the market will lead and push towards growing inequality, growing divisions. And if we say to people things like, you can't make separate entrances, you can't divide the poor houses from the rich houses, and let's not forget, everybody who lives in social housing, everybody who lives in housing association flats is paying rent. They're paying the right rent for them. They're normal working people on average wages in many, many cases. Those of us on average wages can't afford to buy big market rate flats. And so we need to be getting as many as possible out of the developers.
But that's why,
and we need to be making sure that the developments that are built are single tenure as far as people can see. We can't make them divided in society. We can't lead
I think Alex's
that
point
or
is
encourage
who's going
that
to
with our
decide
rules.
that?
And more than that, you're fiddling while Rome burns. The point is, at the moment, London needs about 300,000 to 400,000 flats to allow people to live where they used to live 15 years ago. And I'm not interested about poor doors and gardens. I'm interested about politicians building on grey zones, on industrial areas, which they're not doing in the numbers needed. And I think this debate distracts us completely from the huge debate, which is most councils allow developments to happen without anywhere near enough social housing. And that's a much bigger problem than some silly playground.
We have to be firm with developers about the number of houses and the type of houses that we want.
Let's get a response. This is the Guinness Partnership that are involved with this. We are in absolute agreement with Henley Homes that all customers should have access to all play areas and amenities. We're now working with Warwick Estates, who manage the private development, to ensure that this happens as soon as possible. They are going to turn this around.
And there you go. Everybody agrees.
And Alex's point is still valid. It's the community that came together and said, this isn't all right. We want our children to be able to play together and actually, you want to engage people and you want those properties to be built.
Yeah, well, what we've done in my borough is we've changed the planning rules to stop this happening in the first place. And that's
Has it slowed down the development?
There's enough ways that children are divided on the basis
Has it slowed down
of
the
income
development
now.
of properties, though, Sian?
No, not at all.
And the average price
it's
for a
easy
flat in
as
Camden
anything.
is £600,000, which means you need to earn about 170 grand to live in Camden. So I wouldn't say your policies are working particularly well.
Which makes it even more important to
we shouldn't be
build a
worrying about
mixed
this. We
community
should be
in the
worrying
future.
about building a lot more flats.
This is what Lambeth Council had to say. We understand the developer now plans to make the play area open to all residents. We welcome this and we'll be monitoring and holding them to account.
Well,
Thank you
watch and
both
see.
for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much to both of you.